Congratulations, you're 3 weeks pregnant. The doctor's words kept ringing in my head throughout the drive home, and I found myself fiddling with my fingers while trying to hide my excitement. I hadn't expected the dizziness and aches to actually be attributed to pregnancy, because Alpha and I had only been intimate a few times, and during those times, he always made it a priority to pull out and stain my thighs with his cum. He had always been careful not to pour his seed inside of me, so how was it possible that I was pregnant? The doctor had told me that it was still possible to get pregnant even after I explained my S***UAL relationship to him. Although I had been a little freaked out when he had handed me the test results, I couldn't help the happiness that crawled into my heart. Early last year, my father had arranged my marriage with Nicholas Preston, the Alpha of Northern Park. Every other woman in my shoes might have been excited for such an opportunity, but I wasn't. I found myself to be rather unlucky and cursed. Nicholas Preston was a man with looks that could put any woman on her knees, pooling with a great year for him. His jet black hair and light hazel eyes, along with his defined jawline, pointed nose that led down to mildly plum red lips, added to the things that made him a greatly desired man. He was tall with straight hair that he preferred to keep tamed and an aura that commanded respect. He was a rumored war machine, a bloodthirsty beast that never hesitated to bring upon death to all to dare defile him. He was a power-hungry monster who ruled with an iron fist, thinking about how many packs he had destroyed and taken over, innocent lives he had shed for the mere sake of expanding his territory. Grew a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I had no choice. My wedding to him had already been stamped, and there was no amount of resistance or protest that could change it, so I accepted my fate and rather decided to get to know him. Perhaps he wouldn't be as bad as the rumors. Or so I had thought. I had soon enough eaten my words, having my benefit of the doubt slapped to my face, because I had discovered almost immediately after our marriage that he was worse than the devil himself. He treated me like scum and made sure to rub in my face how my parents never cared about me. He always said that if my father cared about me, he wouldn't have agreed to give him my hand in marriage. He would beat me till I was on the verge of passing out, use my B*dy to clean the floor, and later on manipulate my B*dy into growing wet enough for him to F***K my aching B*dy till I had passed out. I spent every day the next morning covering my bruises with makeup. Every day was a bloody nightmare living with him, but I had to suck it up and live on, for the sake of my father. I knew it wasn't his fault that he agreed to get me married to him. Nicholas was an irresistible monster, and he prided himself in the fact that he always took whatever he wanted, even if he had to make sure of his threatening aura and hierarchy. I had considered running away a few times, but I never went through with it. Besides, there were times when Nicholas showed me a sweet side of him. It was a side that gave me hope in our marriage. A Luna must always be strong in the face of adversity. That was what Nicholas always kept telling me. Whenever he was beating the crap out of me, I wasn't exactly one of the strongest wolves, but I wasn't the weakest either. I was a gamma wolf, but with my lack of skill, I could be mistaken for an omega. My wolf wasn't of the regular size gamma wolves usually possessed. She was smaller, and it made people question my ranking truly. Sighing, I tried to bear a positive mindset. A smile found its way to my lips, and I rubbed my belly, hoping that this pregnancy was going to be my ticket to a better life and happier marriage. I had hoped that Alpha Nicholas would look at me more kindly and treat me nicer. Now that I was carrying his child, I wanted this child to bring us together and shape us into an ideal couple. I was anxious to know what his reaction would be once I got to tell him, and the moment the car came to a halt, I dashed out of the car, running into the huge mansion with a smile plastered on my face. Alpha! Alpha! I called out to him while running in the direction I knew I would find him. He always spent the majority of his days in his chamber, seated on his throne while he deliberated with elders and fellow high-ranking personnel, issues that threatened the safety of wolves in his territory. Pushing the huge brown mahogany door open, I rushed into the room with a smile on my face, breathless from all my running, but the smile soon faded when at one glance swept over the room, discovered my father knelt in front of Nichols, his B*dy badly bruised and beaten up. The beta, Hunter Garrett, stood up almost immediately at my intrusion, his aging face twisted into an expression that screamed accusations at me. I moved my eyes to fall on the gamma, but he looked away, his face colored with disgust. I faced Nicholas, confused and shocked by the cold atmosphere and the sight I was currently witnessing. His darkened eyes fell on me, and I gulped because I recognized that look as the one he gave whenever his blood was boiling over. I immediately rushed beside my father, looking over his wounds with worried eyes before I turned to Nicholas again. What has father done? Why is he covered in bruises? Ask him yourself. His nonchalant tone had me blinking in fear. I turned to my father, but he lowered his head, choosing to remain silent. Panic grew in me, and I reverted my eyes to the Alpha. Please, what has he done? He allied with other alphas and plotted to dethrone the Alpha. He's being charged with treason, and you know the punishment for treason, Hunter answered, glowering at me. My eyes widened as my blood ran cold. Treason? Never. My father would never betray the Alpha like that. He was his most loyal devotee. He would never do that. No. There must be some mistake. Father can't do such a thing. I beg you, please reconsider. I frantically pleaded with tears in my eyes. Nicholas arched a brow at me. He already confessed to it. His tone lacked emotion. The breaths got knocked out of my chest at his words, and I immediately turned to my father in denial. Papa, what are they talking about? You're innocent, right? Papa, Tell them you're innocent. I cried while feeling his face. My father's silence and lowered gaze confirmed my deepest fear. Nicholas wasn't lying. He had actually confessed. He was actually guilty of the accusations. But why? Why did he do it? Why, Papa? Tears streamed down my face. I saw Nicholas signal the guards to take him from me and I began screaming, "Please, please don't kill him, have mercy on him, Nicholas, please, I beg you, don't kill him, I have no else except him. Forgive him." I didn't care that I was creating a scene. I was just a woman desperately trying to appeal to the heart of her dear husband. I wanted him to look at me and understand my pain. I had never requested anything from him before, so I wanted him to really consider me, even if it was going to be just once. Nicholas rolled his eyes at my tantrum before gently raising himself from his throne, proceeding to take slow, menacing steps towards me with dangerous eyes glinting with rage. He approached me, and before I got the chance to understand his next line of actions, I found myself writhing on the floor with arms wrapped around my stomach, flying across the room, from the effect of his kick to my stomach. "No, don't hurt her. She has no hand in this, leave her alone." My father screamed, "Stay away from her, you *** king monster." I coughed, gasping for breaths while fighting tears. I looked up and he was in front of me. He grabbed me by the neckline of my blouse and went ahead to drag me all the way to the round table while I kicked, screamed, and fought. Wait. And no, I'm free." He slammed my head against the table repeatedly, silencing the rest of my words, and when he saw that I was beginning to bleed heavily, he tossed me on the floor. Why did he beat me like that in front of all of them? I knew he had no regard for me, but today was on a different level. I looked into his eyes and all I saw was disgust. Please, don't." I managed to gasp through fading consciousness. He scoffed, then went ahead to spit on me. I watched him through teary eyes, unable to move a single bone in my ***dy. I felt pain everywhere and I feared for my unborn child. I didn't deserve to be treated like this. I hadn't offended anyone, so why was the goddess subjecting me to such torture? "Take her out of my sight. I want her whipped and locked up in the dungeons with no food and water, till I request her presence." His words sliced my heart. His voice was devoid of attachment of any sort. When the guards were hesitant to approach me, he screamed at them. I said, "Take this piece of trash away from my sight before I snap all your necks. She's not my Luna anymore." It seemed like time had slowed down as I laid on the floor gasping for breaths, writhing on the floor like a wounded worm, trying to get one last look of my father while the guards grabbed me and began dragging me out of the room. I couldn't even fight. I was already weakened from the beating I had received. While getting dragged out of the room, I watched the alpha walk up to my screaming father and jerk him out of the hold of the guards holding him down. He was fighting to get to me. I saw it in his eyes that he never wanted this life for me. "Go to her," Nicholas said to him with a devilish smile that hinted at mischief. I watched my father waste not a second to think about his words. He had barely limped 2 steps when my eyes widened, my heart feeling like it had been sliced from my ***dy at the sight I had just witnessed. Nicholas had pushed his claws through my father's chest and ripped out his heart while he was trying to get to me. Without the blink of an eye in that moment, he stood as the personification of the devil, with those darkened eyes and cruel grin. "No!" I screamed, as the agony consumed me, unable to come to terms with the horror I had just witnessed. I had forgotten how to breathe as I stared at my father's collapsed ***dy, his lifeless eyes boring into mine. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I could only feel endless tears stream down my face while Nicholas growled at me, proceeding to dart out his tongue and lick the flesh blood that still dropped from my father's beating heart. My heart thudded in my chest, the trauma of what I had just witnessed, drowning me, pushing me past the border of sanity. That was all it took for darkness to claim me. 5 days, that's how long I had remained chained, left to endure the agonizing burn of the silver against my skin, trapped in a cell that stank of dried blood, sweet, damp walls and misery. Water dripped onto the floor, seeping into my cell and staining my bare legs that were now discolored as a result of numerous bites from insects that creeped into my cell and cohabited in the walls. I could feel my eyes struggling to remain open. Slow dry breaths echoed across the small space as I remained on the floor, weak from the ceaselessly crying till my tear ducts ran out of liquid. My whole ***dy was aching from the beating I had received that day and the numerous strokes from the bull's whip Nicholas had asked his guards to whip me with. I feared for my baby's life because after enduring all the ordeal, I wasn't fed. I was left to starve, without even as much as a glass of water to quench my thirst. My lips were cracked and I had bruises all over my ***dy. My wolf, Aya, couldn't even do much to help because she was also dying of hunger. I knew I wasn't holding up well. I was drifting towards losing consciousness and I figured it wouldn't be long before I passed out. I twisted my ***dy at the pain that attacked my abdomen. Unable to even cry out, I lowered my hands to cradle my stomach, muffling the screams that wanted to burst out of me. My blood ran cold when I felt liquid trickle down my legs, shattering my heart as the well-being of my child ran through my mind. I needed help, but no matter how hard I tried to scream, I couldn't. I heard thudding steps approaching and through a blurred sight, I made out the image of guards saying something. The click that resounded from the lock getting undone had me twisting slightly to force myself to get a better sight of what was coming my way. "Shit, she's bleeding, go call the alpha." A guard thundered. I heard existing steps, unable to keep my eyes open when I felt fingers grip my right wrist, checking for a pulse. Minutes later, steps echoed in the hall and I smelt him, his earthy musk. I figured the dispatched guard had informed him and he had decided to come along. Nicholas approached me, lowering himself to my level. He ran his eyes over my appearance, eyeing the pool of blood I was lying in. His dark gaze chilled my bones, my spine stiffening when I felt him drag a finger down my bloody thighs, feeling the warm crimson liquid. He hummed and turned to his guards. Take her to the pack doctor. She might be useless, but she's worth more to me alive than dead. Have her ready by tonight for my guests. They definitely need some sort of entertainment. My heart snapped when his words echoed in my fading consciousness. How could I have ever conceived the thoughts that we could ever be a couple? Nicholas had never looked at me like I was a woman worth keeping around, and it made me wonder why he bothered requesting my hand in marriage, from the long line of women willing to be his mistress. Why did he choose me if he was just going to keep treating me like garbage? I wondered if he even saw me as a living being. To him, I was just a plaything. But what threw me into deep shock was how he could utter such harsh words with a straight face after witnessing my distressed state. He wore not an inkling of worry on his face. He only cared about discarding me to his friends? I had gotten myself entangled with a devil and a way out seemed non-existent. A strained gasp left my lips before a loud volt of pain clotted my lower back, making me jerk as consciousness finally slipped from me. Loud beeping had my eyes weakly growing open, my consciousness slowly returning to me. I groaned, gently twisting as my dy protested being awake, rejecting the bright light that hit my dull and heavy eyes. My neck ached as I turned my head to get a better understanding of where I was. I raised my hands, blinking at the tubes that connected me to a few machines. I felt my face and gently took off the oxygen mask. Hating the restriction, I gently ran my hand through my hair, drawing in deep breaths to stabilize my breathing. I heard the knob get turned and immediately turned to find the pack doctor enter the room with a distressed look on his face, which he was trying to hide. I gawked at him, knowing it ironic how I was brought to him in worse condition when he had informed me just few days ago to avoid any stressful action. Recalling the pain that had knocked me unconscious in the pool of blood, I drew a deep breath and faced him with sad eyes. Tell me the truth, doctor, how's the baby doing? Dr. Rashid sighed, lowering his head with an aura that said it all. I read it from his countenance that I had lost the pregnancy. You had suffered internal bruises as a result of the external strain on your dy, which resulted in internal hemorrhage. I'm sorry, but your baby didn't make it. I have informed the Alpha. He cleared his throat, refusing to let the pity he felt show. I deduced from his expression that Nicholas hadn't said anything positive. I was sure he didn't even bat an eyelid when the doctor had informed him of the miscarriage. Why would he anyways when he was solely responsible for my condition? They all killed my baby. Nicholas killed my baby. I hated them so darn much and it terrified me just how much hatred was rolling off me. He had instructed that he cleared his throat again, unable to meet my gaze. Clean you up, Anna, load you on painkillers and discharge you tonight, so the maids can you ready for the guests. I'm so sorry, Luna. I tried to tell him you weren't in suitable condition, but he threatened to drop me if I didn't obey. A wry smile crept onto my lips as a devastated chuckle rumbled in my throat. I wouldn't have expected less from Nicholas. He was a monster who lacked a heart. He was worse than the rumors portrayed him. Dr. Rashid gently moved away from the door, signaling the Shillahettes behind the door to enter the room. 3 maids walked in, bowing their head at me in respect that I wanted to badly to yell at them to quit. I perceived it as mockery. I had no strength in me to struggle, so when a maid beckoned on me, I gently scooted out of the bed and let them lead me out of the infirmary. They lead me down the connecting hallway, taking a turn to approach steps that climbed to the hallway that lead to my room. I was made to walk in the middle of them, lifelessly trudging behind, till one of them suddenly paused, maintaining a moment of silence before turning to face us. I have just received a mind link from the Alpha. He's requesting my presence. He was further instructions for me. Her firm voice came. Eleanor, you run her bath and get her ready. Gia, go meet Madame Blanca for the lingerie the Alpha had selected for her. I'll be with you shortly. Luna. She bowed her head before walking away. The blonde maid whom I deduced was Gia followed behind her, leaving me with the redhead, who led me into my room. She sat me on the bed, excusing herself to run the bath. I gawked at her, seething with rage. I couldn't stomach being around any of them. This place only brought me pain, and sitting in the room in which Nicholas usually kept me a prisoner, I was filled with dread. I couldn't stand being here for another minute. Then run away. I can help you knock out the frail maid, giving you enough time to run as fast you can away from here before the maids return. Aya squeaked. I chewed on my bottom lip, feeling determined. I wasn't going to let Nicholas disrespect me anymore. Tonight was a ball, so everyone would be too absorbed in receiving guests. A perfect opportunity to run away. I would probably be long gone before they'd be able to figure out my absence. I picked up a vase from the stool station beside the bed and walked as quietly as I could to the bathroom. I stood behind her and with every strength I could muster, swung the vase as hard as I could, gasping when she immediately slumped, bleeding from the impact of my swing. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed the jacket from the maid, threw it on and dashed out of the room, skidding as fast as I could down the steps, ignoring the ache in my dy as I ran. I didn't want them to figure me out till I was out of this bloody mansion. Turn left and blend in with the crowd. Don't draw attention to yourself, Aya said. I made a turn, choosing to slip out through the crowds, disguised as a maid. I threw my hair over my face, walking as stealthily as I could through the most occupied part of the hall, careful not to draw attention to myself. My bare feet shuddered as the cold floor sent chills up my spine. I was dirty, with roughed hair, still clad in the short hospital gown. The cold breeze kissed my dy and I sprinted away from the mansion doors, feeling my emotions pile when I saw the gate come into sight. I was finally going to be free, or so I thought, till I heard a guard call after me. Panicked, I increased my pace, refusing to turn. I heard loud steps behind me and knew he was hot on my trail and was probably requesting backup. Make a right turn, Aya said. I nodded, immediately changing routes, choosing to take the path that went behind the garage as Aya had directed. I glanced back, my eyes widening when I saw more guards chasing after me. I turned and found a black Porsche driving forward, with black Rovers trailing behind it. Keep running forward, Aya instructed. Are you sure? I asked. Just do it. I was weak and running out of breath, but I did as she asked, increasing my pace even as I saw the car slow down. I turned back to glance at the guards and a panicked breath escaped my lips when I saw one almost behind me, reaching out his hands to grab me. I evaded him but looked in front too late to avoid colliding with a strong *dy. Vanilla and sandalwood wafted through the air, kissing my nose. It was a mouth-watering scent that made my inside sore. Tingles erupted from where I had made contact with him, jolting electrifying chills through my *dy. I felt myself growing weak in the knees, wits away from purring like a cat. His arm had wrapped around my waist when I had collided with him in an attempt to stabilize my balance, and I looked up only to have my breaths knocked out of my chest because looking down at me were the darkest shade of gray eyes that I had ever been opportune to meet. Subconsciously, still trapped in the entrancing moment, I ended up blurting out a word that shocked me to the core. Mate, tell me why again it's important I attend that shitty event? I rumbled for the umpteenth time since Xander had informed me of the invite to a bail that I had no intention of attending. Every year, I received invites to attend events hosted by the Alpha King of the Northern Territory, and every year, I always ignored them because I wasn't a sycophant. I saw no reason to surround myself with power-hungry, selfish, utter disgusting and egotistic buffoons, but it appeared Nicholas never took the hint. The Northern Army had gained vast control over majority of the lands, and Alphas far and wide were bowing to him, choosing to form and maintain a ridiculous relationship with him in exchange for more fame and power. Apparently, being allied with his name radiated fear and they wanted that, but Nicholas wasn't satisfied. Amongst all he owned, he lacked something that he wasn't going to rest till he had acquired, and that was getting allied with me so he could have access to my hardened army and bountiful lands. My wealth, in-depth connection with the council and army was what he craved, and he never relented in his efforts to form a relationship with me so he could brag about it to his stupid entourage. Because Blaze, you've almost become a recluse, you keep yourself locked within the confines of the mansion and almost never make an appearance. How do you expect to find your mate when you do not attend such events? Xander, my trusted beta and best friend, replied. I clicked my tongue dryly, dreading when the despised gate came into view. What make you think she'll be at such events, HM? I arched a brow at him from the back seat. He snuck a look at me through the rearview mirror. You can call it instinct, I sighed in defeat. You could have at least reduced the entourage. Nothing less for you, dearest Alpha. Now don't forget to wear a smile and keep you distaste swallowed, he said with his lips curled in a teasing smirk. Knowing me so well, as my car pulled into the compound, greeted by the security at the gate, my brows furrowed when I saw what looked like a woman running in the direction of my moving car with a determined expression on her face. Had she lost her goddamn mind running towards a moving vehicle like that? I immediately turned to Xander, who had pulled the brakes impromptu, forcing the car to a stop before it could hit her. I got out of the car with an arched brow, eager to understand what the hell was going through her mind when the utterly delicious scent of chocolate and flowers assaulted my nose, tugging on my heart, making me want to howl. The lady whose attention had been drawn to the uniformed men chasing her, tried to evade getting caught and ended up running into my hard chest. Mate, Sinclair howled. She is mate, we found mate. He wagged his tail like a love-struck puppy, prancing around with his tongue darted out. I caught her, reaching my hand to grab her waist and steady her, and my body grew hot at the contact, goosebumps proceeding to dance on my skin as I glanced down at the woman. She was very small, looking like a child, and my eyes darkened when I caught sight of what looked burns around her wrist, my arms, and she looked up, and my word, astonishment was an understatement for what I felt when those dazzling amber eyes bore into mine. But my excitement soon disappeared when I noticed the bruises on her face. My attention was soon brought to the men chasing her, and I subconsciously pulled her further into my arms, flashing dangerously red eyes and bared canines at the guards. Chapter 3. Xander, still confused by what was playing out, took my side, flashing a deadly look at the guards, who immediately came to a stop, backing away in fear, suffocated by New York menacing aura. I heard steps and looked away from the guards that I so badly wanted to tear to pieces, my frown deepening when I saw Nicholas heading my way with the fakest smile plastered on his face. Ah, Alpha Blaze Vermont, I'm quite honored that you could honor the invitation this time around. He extended his hand for a handshake, but I ended up glaring at his hand with flaming eyes. Pie, he understood my distaste and retracted his hand, moving his astute gaze to notice the woman in my arms. I noticed his eyes widen for a second in surprise before turning to stealthily signal his guards to remain on standby. With his eyes still on the woman, he cleared his throat, a slight trace of annoyance striking his eyes. Please, don't let her trouble you. I'll have the guards take her away and punish her for misbehavior. She's not the most well-behaved fish in the sea. His comment struck a thick nerve, making my eye twitch. Sinclair was enraged by the discovery, ready to go on a rampage at the idea that his mate was being maltreated. I noticed him signal the guards to take her away from me, and I let out a terrifying growl that shook the building. Touch her and watch me commit a massacre in the blink of an eye. My voice was low and terrifying, my eyes glowing red as Sinclair fought to take control. Nicholas, I twitched, but he chose to swallow his annoyance and clear his throat, continuing with his charade of a welcoming host. Well, do forgive me for my comment. Please, come in, Blaze, the others are awaiting your presence. Having had enough his attempts, I turned to the frail woman and gently lowered my hand to caress her face. She had a small face that fit perfectly in my hands, and her big orbs, cheeks, plump rosy lips and round nose, reminded me of a child. She bore childlike features. She gawked at me in surprise before looking away in an effort to hide her blush. She looked so tired and weak, skinny and dirty. Her wild black hair covered her face, but her tiny hands never let go of the side of my coat that she had grabbed when she had seen Nicholas coming. It was obvious that she was terrified of him. What is your name, little one? I asked. She bit her lips before squeaking in a shy tone, Vera. My eyes were glued to her pouty lips, battling Sinclair that was panting like a dog in heat. Marker, claymate now, he kept chanting over and over. Not now, but very soon, I said to him, sharing his desire. Vera, I looked how her name tasted in my mouth. Permit me to take you with me. She didn't need to say anything. The way she looked at me with eagerness said it all. I signaled Xander to get the men ready for our departure, and though confused, still obeyed. Nicholas, upon noticing that my departure was at hand, said, Blaze, you do not want to leave without greeting the others. They've been dying to meet you. There was an underlying threat in his tone. I'm not interested in your gathering of hypocrites. I'm not about ready to endure unbearable minutes of unhidden sycophancy. I'll take the girl. She appears to have captured my attention, I said with heavy eyes that promised hell to anyone who dared intervene. Nicholas growled, unable to contain his rage, and took supposedly intimidating steps forward till he was face to a face with me. His eyes flashed silver and in a thunderous voice said, Blaze, do not forget who owns the land you're currently standing on. You do not want to disrespect me in my own territory, Vermont. I'll have you and your men dead before you even get to cross the border. My lips tilted in a mischievous grin as my eyes suddenly turned an empty black. Is that so? I waved my finger and in an instant, teleported every belonging and men of mine away from his grounds. Good luck finding me, my fated whisper resounded as I vanished, enjoying the look of horror on his face at my little trick. No, I jolted awake, drenched in sweat as ugly memories haunted my dreams. Sleeping had been almost impossible for me because I feared the images my mind dug out to haunt my nights. The softness of the bed I was lying on was very foreign, making me backed into a corner of the bed, wondering where I was. Taking a quick glance around, I noticed the gray paint that colored the walls of the room, exquisite paints that were sparsely scattered around the room, a ceiling to a floor window that was covered by thin cream-colored curtains. A large TV was hung on the wall opposite the bed, an AC hung by a corner of the wall's blew cold air into room. There was a large red rug lying in the middle of the room, a glass table that had a laptop, a stack of papers, a basket filled with pens and pencils, seated on it, and chair by another corner of the room, close to wide stretching shelves that was lined with books. A large slide door stood by the far end of the room and another stood a few inches away from it, with a mat and blue slides rested on it. A wide dresser was stationed by the bed and on it was a larvae lamp, and two expensive-looking phones. Whoever owned this room must be very rich because it was incredibly spacious and screamed money. I turned to my left and found a man lying on the recliner besides the big black door. My eyes widened when I realized that last night wasn't just my imagination playing a cruel prank on me. It had actually happened. I had met my mate, and the mere thought of how he had looked at me like I was the most intriguing thing he had ever set his eyes on had red crawling up my cheeks. I recalled falling asleep in his arms at some point after he had carried me into the car, and said something to me in a soothing voice. I moped at him, remembering how he had defended me in front of Nicholas, without batting an eyelid or considering fear. I wondered who he was, but I did recall Nicholas calling him Blaze Vermont. He exuded a powerful aura, and judging from his pheromone intensity, I figured he was a pure blood, and from I had heard, pure bloods were rare, almost a myth. I pushed myself out of the bed, pausing when I noticed that I was now out of the dirty hospital gown and now clad in an oversized t-shirt that surrounded me with that yummy scent of his. I found myself sniffing it while wondering if he had bathed me and clothed me, because I appeared to be clean, or did he instruct someone to do it? I padded across the room till I was right in front of his and tilted my head as I watched him sleep. He had dark circles surrounding his eyes, and though he looked very tired, there was a peaceful look on his chiseled face. His defined jawline and high cheekbones made his beauty surreal. His skin was Caucasian, matching his sandy blonde hair that pooled over his forehead in thick curls. He was indeed very handsome. I wondered if he was comfortable lying in a small chair in such a position, dressed in gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt that clung to his muscles, and found my hands reaching to push the air out of his face. He could have just shared the bed with me. I wouldn't have minded getting held in his arms, even in his sleep. His aura was still as commanding as before. My fingers traced his face and a gasp tore through my lips as I jerked back, having had my hand seized by a suddenly awakened Blaze. His stormy gray eyes slid down my body and he immediately let me go, having had acted on impulse as my touch had startled him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I stuttered awkwardly. "Forgive me if I startled you," he whispered in a groggy tone, pinning his eyes on my bruised face. Under his scrutiny, I was left to fiddle with my fingers while contemplating my next move. I felt his gaze travel all over my body and heat crawled up my body. Something about the way his slid down my body had me quaking with need, while at the same thing making my heart pound faster as I wondered what he'd think of the bruises and scratches that adorned my body. Nicholas hadn't been kind to me in our marriage, and it left me with a lot of scars that I was afraid to show him. I didn't want him to look at me like I was a broken doll. Unable to stand the intensity of his gaze anymore and driven by my unhealthy thoughts, I turned, aimed for the bed, but was halted by a strong grip on my hand that then proceeded to pull me onto his thighs. "Don't go, stay," he whispered into my ear while rubbing circles on my back. "I want you to stay with me." His voice was octaves lower and very hypnotic, owning a unique baritone. His breaths became hard as he made me straddle him. I noticed just how muscular and young he was, and it made me want to swoon. He gently caressed my cheek, trailing his index finger down my jaw with a fever-rent gaze locked on me. Gently, he leaned closer to me, inhaling his scent while rubbing the tip of his nose against my sensitive skin, making his hot, jagged breaths fan my skin. He placed my hands around his neck and buried his face in the crook of my neck, nuzzling into me. "Goddess, you smell just like me, and you don't know how much it turns me on to see you dressed in my cloth, so mine," he breathed against my skin, his baritone vibrating my skin and making me gasp. His scent was intoxicating me, pulling me deeper down the dark pit of desire. I felt him flick his tongue against my skin, dragging his tongue up my neck while his teeth gently grazed my skin. His action sent electricity volts reverberating throughout my body, enlisting a breathy moan from me. "You have no idea how much restraint I had to apply to stop myself from claiming you right there and then, Vera." He nibbled on my skin, making my head roll backwards. His fingers trailed down my skin, setting ablaze any part of me that he touched. He was gently yet intentional, seductive yet soft. It was like was seeking permission from my voice with every careful touch of his. I found my body reacting to him in a way that overwhelmed me. It was like every cell in my body recognized him as mine, and with every touch of his, my body surrendered itself to it, yearning for more. His touch, need pooled in me, streaming down my legs the more he touched me. I wanted more. I needed more. It was like I had been starved all my life, and being his arms, inhaling his scent and listening to his voice was the drug I needed to cure my hunger. I needed all of him. I was slowly responding to him, rocking my ass back and forth on him to combat the ache that rocked my body. I heard him groan. His grip on my waist tightened, the desire from him drowning me. "Fuck!" he exclaimed. I felt him grow underneath my ass and poke my butt. One wiggled and he groaned yet again, holding me in place with his head tilted backwards. "Don't do that, little one. I might not be able to control myself if you do," he rasped. He twitched underneath my ass, making me bury my head in embarrassment. I wasn't a virgin, but seeing how he was responding to me was enough to make me flush. He looked so yet adorable as he looked into my eyes feverly. "Mate with him, he will make us stronger." Mate is very powerful and different, I howled, panting in my head. I stared at him, contemplating my next line of actions. I wanted all of him, but I was scared of him seeing my scars. "He doesn't care. I've talked to his wolf. They want us like that. He won't hurt you, Vera. He loves us. Give him a chance," I encouraged me. After seconds of staring at him in awe, I began intentionally grinding against him, giving in to the haze of want. His eyes dimmed, beclouded by surprise and lust. His grip on me grew tighter and his breaths became increasingly strained. I ran the tip of my nose against his neck, feeling him shudder. His fingers dragged down to the hem of my t-shirt, rubbing circles on my inner thigh. I moaned, and his eyes darkened even more, but I could still see him grappling onto self-control. "I want to take you so bad, mark you so the whole world will know you're mine," he whispered while gently stroking me, groaning at how wet I was. "Then do it." I breathed out, trapped in a haze of pleasure. He growled, seizing my lips with his, kissing me feverishly. My lips moved against him, struggling to keep up with his hungry pace. His tongue met mine, tasting every corner of my mouth, engaging me in a spicy salsa. His kiss was passionate yet dominant, leaving me stained by his minty breaths. Our breaths grew harder, mingling to create a panting frenzy as both of us fought for dominance. My fingers dug into his hair, fisting his curls as his skilled mouth lit me apples. I felt him immediately lift me up, making me wrap my legs around him as he carried me towards the bed. His fingers dug into my ass, fisting the flesh of my cheeks. He gently dropped me on the bed, watching my body land on the bed with a gentle bounce. The bed dipped and I looked up to find him hovering above me, boring into me with those beautiful gray eyes of his. He leaned down and caught my lips and my legs wrapped around him. My fingers were lost in his silky hair, tugging on it as he kissed me harder. He kissed the comber of my mouth and gently began trailing kisses down my neck, nipping and sucking on my skin till he got to my collarbone. His hand snuck up to my braids, massaging my left mound while sucking on my sweet spot, making me arch my back at how divine his touch was. Nicholas had never made me feel like this. He was never as gentle as Blaze. His fingers dragged my t-shirt up to my breasts and I gently lifted my back and raised my hands to his access to me. Once the t-shirt was gone, my insecurities returned and I moved my hands to cover myself. I couldn't handle his deep gaze on my body. I knew his eyes were scanning every inch in my skin and my cheeks flushed because I lying naked on his bed. He saw them, the scars scattered against my skin that I couldn't do away with, and I noticed his eyes darkened and a vein popped in his head. "Do you still want me?" I asked with involuntary tears forming in my eyes. His eyes softened when he noticed the unshed tears in my eyes and he leaned his forehead against mine with closed eyes. Of course I want you. I've been waiting for you my whole life. Seeing those scars just makes me want to hurt that asshole even more. He gently patted my hair, raising his face so my eyes could meet his mesmerized gaze had my biting onto my lower lip while staring into his eyes. You're so darn beautiful. He kissed my cheeks, then the tip of my nose before catching my lips in his once again. She was angelic and petite with well-rounded breasts and surprisingly voluptuous ass and hips. Though she was on the skinny side, she was still extremely beautiful and shapely, a sacred ornament that I was afraid to touch because I feared I'd break her. It was taking everything in me not to throw her legs over my shoulder and pound her till my name was the only thing on her lips. I wanted her nails to dig into my skin while I showed her pleasure in a way no man has. I saw them, the scars that lined her skin, and it made me suck in a breath at how cruel someone would have to be able to cause her such pain, and it made me fear what her back held. I wanted to see them all so it would fuel my hunger to drive my fists through Nicholas Preston's face. Recalling his comment last night, I knew he was responsible for her wounds and it broke my heart. I couldn't imagine the amount of pain she must have endured in seeing her lying on my bed, trusting me with her insecurities, bearing herself to me, make me revere her even more. She was a strong woman and I was glad she was mine. I could perceive his scent on her and it annoyed me, making me itch to erase every memory she had of him. I knew she wasn't a virgin but I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for ultimate perfection when I knew I was far from it. I kissed her collarbone, sucking on the spot in between her neck, loving how she moaned in response to me. I licked the spot I wanted my mark to be, withholding myself from doing it immediately. I wanted to savor the moment, to mark her at the peak of her pleasure while driving into her. I ran my tongue over her skin, kneading her fleshy mounds one after the other with rapt attention and gentleness. I wanted her to enjoy this as much as I was. Bringing her pleasure would bring me pleasure. I loved how she shuddered when my hot breaths kissed her sensitive nipple. I flicked my tongue over her knob and she arched her bag, drawing in a sharp gasp. I released her hands, letting her fingers thread my hair. I wanted her to know that she owned me. I needed her to touch me with ease. Her fingers ran down my nape, pulling me closer as I licked and sucked her right breast while massaging her other one. I enjoyed the sight of goosebumps on her skin. Our mingled breaths was a hint to how heavy our craving was right there. She breathed out, thumbed against her skin, making her moan. I took my time, gently turning my attention to her other breasts, doing the same thing I had to her right mound. She yelped, gasping, and tugging on my strands at how skilled and careful I was. So good, she moaned. I moved away from her breasts, liking from the valley of her breasts down to her abdomen. She wiggled, writhing underneath me as I made sure to torture her with immense pleasure. I wanted to kiss every inch of her beautiful skin, run my tongue over every scar so she'd understand how precious she was to touch. Her body was a shrine I wanted to worship. Her arousal wafted through my nose and it was the most delicious scent I had ever perceived. It made my mouth water and dick twitch. I wanted to taste her so bad. I wanted to lick every corner of her while she screamed my name for all to hear and know that she was mine. Holy, how did I get so darn lucky? I couldn't look away from her enticing pink skin and it was driving Sinclair crazy with need. I gently raised her legs, dead-angled them from my body and hung them on my shoulder. With a mischievous smirk on my face, I ran the tip of my nose along the length of her inner thighs, inhaling her sweet scent. She was looking at me. I could feel her gaze burning into my skin. My hot breaths fanned her core and she moaned. I was marveled at how wet and ready she was for me. Preparing myself for dessert, her breaths hitched when I ran my tongue over her slit and she screamed when I had suddenly lost control at how humany she tasted and put my tongue to use. Fuck, Blaze, she yelped. Call my name, sweetheart, I husked, busying myself on her. She writhed on the bed, screaming and twisting while I feasted on her, licking and slurping, sucking and nipping on her bud. I held her waist in place, digging my fingers into her skin at how good she tasted. I felt myself twitch in my pants, my erection becoming unbearable and painful. Oh you, yes. Right there, oh goddess, she was a moaning mess, muttering sweet nothings that pleased me. I'm gonna come. She screamed, tugging on my hair and pulling me ever closer to her. Her legs shook and I immediately pulled away, leaving her dazed from the sudden retraction. She blinked at me in confusion and it amused me. I didn't want her coming on my tongue. No, a time for that would come. I wanted her coming on my dick. She propped herself on her elbows, watching me with hooded eyes, and I took off my t-shirt and proceeded to undo my belt. Her eyes glazed over every toned muscle of mine, taking in the tattoo I had gotten after the death of my father, in respect to tradition, as the heir of my pack. I had a few other and it made me giddy how she took in every single one she could see, but I noticed that very tattoo had caught her attention. Do you like it? I asked. She nodded shyly and I smiled, overwhelmed by how extremely adorable she was. I rid myself of my sweatpants and almost went into a fit of laughter when I saw her eyes widen and jaw drop at the sight of my raging member. I wasn't unaware to how endowed I was. I was a solid 8 inches with a 4-inch grit, so I saw her reaction coming, plus, the angry veins that protruded, added to make my member one to fear. She pulled her legs shut, rubbing her thighs as she gawked at me. She shook her negatively and I laughed, gently lowering her to bed. I knelt in front of her and gently gripped her thighs, carefully prying them. I'm not going to hurt you, you can trust me, just draw a deep breath and relax. I'll be gentle, I whispered to her. She held my gaze for a few minutes before taking a deep breath. I smiled at her and leaned down to kiss her lips that had gotten me addicted. In the space of some minutes, she returned my kiss as gently as she could, and I aligned myself with her entrance, kissing her even more while gently pushing into her. Fuck! Her tightness welcomed me, her warmth sending electrifying waves down my spine. She whimpered, writhing from as her body tried to adjust to her size. I didn't break the kiss, it my way of calming her while reassuring her that I wasn't going to hurt her. She clamped around me as I had to grasp onto every single strand of sanity that I owned so I wouldn't lose control in her like a depraved beast. I felt her body gradually relax and she gazed into my eyes, nodding at me to continue. I pulled out a little and slammed into her, making her cry out, Blaze, you're so tight, love. I husked, amazed at her warmth. Her finger dug into my skin even more, drawing blood from me, but I didn't care. I began gently thrusting into her, choosing a slow yet hard tempo. I wanted this last and I wanted her to enjoy it. If I went any faster, I might end up coming before I expected, and I didn't want that. I kept ramming into her with my gaze fixed on her, my breaths almost ragged. Her lips were parted as pleasure zapped through her being. The look of desire in her eyes had my eyes flashing red. I had made love to a few women before, but none of the sessions ever felt like this. Oh shit, her moans were music to my ears, along with the creaking of the bed in our pants. Her sweaty body clung to mine, making her appear like a freaking goddess as she gave me that look that drove me to the brink of insanity, and bit her lips. I increased my pace, and threw my head back, closing my eyes to relish this new feeling. The more I rammed into her, the more she screamed my name. It fueled me to keep going. Blaze, don't stop, she breathed, not till you can't walk anymore. Baby, it was a promise and I was going to do it, even if it was going to require all night. I needed her body to quake as I brought her round after round of orgasms. I needed to see her eyes roll to the back of her head till she was unable to form coherent sentences. I wanted her to only remember me whenever she thought about. Her bloody glistened with sweat and I had the spot in between her neck that shone a bright red and howled. My canines extended and the red in my eyes dominated as I leaned down to inhale her scent. She cried out when my canine dug into her skin, and the pleasure we both felt skyrocketed by 1,000. I drunk on her, enjoying the sound our flesh slapping against each other and the sight of her breasts bouncing each time I pounded into her. I licked the spot that bore my mark and growled, "You're mine now, Vera. All mine."